Okay. All right, there we go. Okay, and let's see, okay, live streamed. Just to confirm, we're starting Nestor today.
Yep.
That we're all on the same page, so to speak.
Yep.
All right, well, then let us begin. Let me just briefly say to those on YouTube, thank you for watching, and we are beginning the chapter 2, the Nestor chapter, takes place in the school. All right, here we go. You, Cochrane, what city sent for him? Trenton, sir. Very good. Well, there was a battle, sir. Very good. Where? The boy's blank face asked the blank window. Fabled by the daughters of memory. Yet it was in some ways, if not as memory fabled it. A phrase then of impatience, thud of Blake's wings of excess. I hear the ruin of all space, shattered glass and toppling masonry, and time one livid final flame. What's left us then? I forget the place, sir. 279 BC. Asculum, Stephen said, glancing at the name and date in the gore-scarred book. Yes, sir. And he said, another victory like that, and we'll be done for. That phrase the world had remembered, a dull ease of the mind. From a hill above a corpse-strewn plain, a general speaking to his officers leaned upon his spear. Any general, to any officers, they lend ear. You, Armstrong, Stephen said, what was the end of Pyrrhus? End of Pyrrhus, sir. I know, sir, I know. Ask me, sir, Coleman said. Wait. You, Armstrong, do you know anything about Pyrrhus? A bag of fig rolls lay snugly in Armstrong's satchel. He curled them between his palms at whiles and swallowed them softly. Crumbs adhered to the tissue of his lips, a sweetened boy's breath. Well-off people, proud that their eldest son was in the Navy, Pico rode Dalkey. Pyrrhus, sir, Pyrrhus, appear. Next, please. Are you still on mute, Bill? There you go.
All laughed, mirthless, high, malicious laughter. Armstrong looked round at his classmates, silly glee in profile. In a moment, they will laugh more loudly, aware of my lack of rule and of the fees their papas pay. Tell me now, Stephen said, poking the boy's shoulder with the book, what is a pier? A pier, sir, Armstrong said. A thing out in the waves, a kind of bridge. Kingston Pier, sir. Some laughed again, mirthless, but with meaning. Two in the backbench whispered. Yes, they knew, had never learned nor ever been innocent. All. With envy, he watched their faces. Edith, Ethel, Gertie, Lily, their likes, their breaths too, sweetened with tea and jam, their bracelets tittering in the struggle. Kingston Pier, Stephen said. Yes, a disappointed bridge. The words troubled their gaze. How, sir? Coleman asked. A bridge is across a river. For Haynes' chapbook. No one here to hear. Tonight, deftly amid wild drink and talk, to pierce the polished mail of his mind. What then? A jester at the court of his master, indulged and disesteemed, winning a clement master's praise. Why had they chosen all that part? Not wholly for the smooth caress. For them, too, history was a tale like any other, too often heard. Their land a pawn shop. Had Pyrrhus not fallen by a beldame's hand in Argos, or Julius Caesar not been knifed to death? They are not to be thought away. Time has branded them, and Fettered they are, lodged in the room of the infinite possibilities they have ousted. But can those have been possible, seeing that they never were? Or was that only possible which came to pass? Weave, weaver of the wind. Tell us a story, sir. Oh, do, sir, a ghost story. Where do you begin in this? Stephen asked, opening another book. Weep no more, Coleman said. Go on then, Talbot. And the history, sir? After, Stephen said. Go on, Talbot. A swarthy boy opened a book and propped it nimbly under the breastwork of his satchel. He recited jerks of verse with odd glances at the text. Weep no more, woeful shepherd, weep no more. For Lycidas, your sorrow is not dead, sunk though he be beneath the watery floor. Next.
It must be a movement then, an actuality of the possible as possible. Aristotle's phrase formed itself within the gabbled verses and floated out into the studious silence of the library of St. Genevieve, where he had read, sheltered from the sin of Paris night by night. By his elbow, a delicate Siamese conned the handbook of strategy. Fed and feeding brains about me under glow lamps impaled, with faintly beating feeders, and in my mind's darkness, a sloth of the underworld, reluctant, eye of brightness, shifting her dragon scaly folds. Thought is the thought of thought, tranquil brightness. The soul is in a manner all that is. The soul is the form of forms, tranquility sudden, vast, candescent, form of forms. Talbot repeated, through the dear might of him that walked the waves, through the dear might, turn over, Stephen said quietly, I don't see anything. What, sir? Talbot asked simply, bending forward. His hand turned the page over. He leaned back and went on again, having just remembered of him that walked the waves. Here also over these craven hearts his shadow lies, and on the scoffer's heart and lips and on mine. It lies upon their eager faces who offered him a coin of the tribute. To Caesar what is Caesar's, to God what is God's. A long look from dark eyes, a riddling sentence to be woven and woven on the church's looms. Aye. Riddle me, Randy Rowe, my father gave me seeds to sow. Talbot slid his book closed into his satchel. Have I heard all? Stephen asked. Yes, sir. Hockey at 10, sir. Half day, sir. Thursday. Who can answer a riddle? Stephen asked. They bundled their books away, pencils clacking, pages rustling. Crowding together, they strapped and buckled their satchels, all gabbling gaily. A riddle, sir. Ask me, sir. Oh, ask me, sir. A hard one, sir. This is the riddle, Stephen said. The cock crew, the sky was blue. The bells in heaven were striking 11. 'Tis time for this poor soul to go to heaven. Next, please.
What is that? What, sir? Again, sir, we didn't hear. Their eyes grew bigger as the lines were repeated. After a silence, Cochrane said, What is it, sir? We give it up. Stephen, his throat itching, answered, The fox burying his grandmother under a holly bush. He stood up and gave a shout of nervous laughter to which their cries echoed dismay. A stick struck the door and a voice in the corridor called, Hockey! They broke asunder, sliding out of their benches, leaping them. Quickly they were gone, and from the lumber room came the rattle of sticks and the clamour of their boots and tongues. Sergeant, who alone had lingered, came forward slowly, showing an open copybook. His tangled hair and scraggy neck gave witness of unreadiness, and through his misty glasses, weak eyes looked up pleading. On each cheek, dull and bloodless, a soft stain of ink lay. date-shaped, recent, and damp as a snail's bed. He held out his copybook. The word sums was written on the headline. Beneath were sloping figures, and at the foot a crooked signature with blind loops and a blot. Cyril Sargent, his name and seal. Mr. Deasy told me to write them all out again, he said, and show them to you, sir. Stephen touched the edge of the book. Futility. Do you understand how to do them now? He asked. Numbers 11 to 15, Sargent answered. Mr. Deasy said I was to copy them off the board, sir. Can you do them yourself? Stephen asked. No, sir. Ugly and futile, lean neck and tangled hair, and a stain of ink, a snail's bed. Yet someone had loved him, borne him in her arms and in her heart. But for her, the race of the world would have trampled him underfoot, a squashed, boneless snail. She had loved his weak, watery blood drained from her own. Was that then real? The only true thing in life, his mother's prostrate body, the fiery Columbanus in holy zeal bestrode. She was no more the trembling skeleton of a twig burnt in the fire, an odour of rosewood and wetted ashes. She had saved him from being trampled underfoot and had gone, scarcely having been. A poor soul gone to heaven, and on a heath beneath winking stars, a fox, red reek of rapine in his fur, with merciless bright eyes, scraped in the earth, listened, scraped up the earth, listened, scraped and scraped. Next, please.
Lois, are you reading?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Sitting at the side, Stephen solved out the problem. He proves by algebra that Shakespeare's ghost is Hamlet's grandfather. Sargent peered askance through his slanted glasses. Hockey sticks rattled in the lumber room. A hollow knock of a ball and calls from the field. Across the page, symbols moved in grave Morris, in the mummery of their letters, wearing quaint caps of squares and cubes. Give hands, traverse, bow to partner. So, imps of fancy of the Moors, gone too from the world, Averroes and Moses Maimonides, dark men in mien and movement, flashing in their mocking mirrors the obscure soul of the world, a darkness shining in brightness, which brightness could not comprehend. Do you understand now? Can you work the second for yourself? Yes, sir. In long, shaky strokes, Sargent copied the data, waiting always for a word of help. His hand moved faithfully the unsteady symbols, a faint hue of shame flickering behind his dull skin. Amo matris, subjective and objective genitive. With her weak blood and whey sour milk, she had fed him and hid from sight of others his swaddling bands. Like him was I, these sloping shoulders, this gracelessness. My childhood bends beside me, too far for me to lay a hand there once or lightly. Mine is far, and his secret as our eyes. Secrets, silent, stony, sit in the dark palaces of both our hearts. Secrets, weary of their tyranny. Tyrants, willing to be dethroned. The sum was done. Next.
It is very simple, Stephen said as he stood up. Yes, sir. Thanks, Sargent answered. He dried the page with a sheet of thin blotting paper and carried his copybook back to his bench. You had better get your stick and go out to the others, Stephen said as he followed towards the door of the boy's graceless form. Yes, sir. In the corridor, his name was heard, called from the playfield. Sargent, run on, Stephen said. Mr. Deasy is calling you. He stood in the porch and watched the laggard hurry towards the scrappy field where sharp voices were in strife. They were sorted in teams, and Mr. Deasy came away stepping over wisps of grass with gaitered feet. When he had reached the schoolhouse, voices again contending called to him. He turned his angry white mustache. What is it now? He cried continually without listening. Cochrane and Halliday are on the same side, sir, Stephen said. Will you wait in my study for a moment, Mr. Deasy said, till I restore order here? And as he stepped fussily back across the field, his old man's voice cried sternly, what is the matter? What is it now? Their sharp voices cried about him on all sides. Their many forms closed around him, the garish sunshine bleaching the honey of his ill-dyed head. Stale, smoky air hung in the study with the smell of drab abraded leather of its chairs. As on the first day he bargained with me here, as it was in the beginning, is now. On the sideboard, the tray of Stuart coins, base treasure of a bog, and ever will be. A snug in their spoon case of purple plush, faded, the 12 apostles having preached to all the Gentiles, world without end. Next, please.
A hasty step over the stone porch and in the corridor, blowing out his rare moustache, Mr. Deasy halted at the table. First, our little financial settlement, he said. He brought out of his coat a pocketbook bound by a leather thong. It slapped open, and he took from it 2 notes, one of joint halves, and laid them carefully on the table. 2, he said, strapping and stowing his pocketbook away. And now his strong room for the gold. Stephen's embarrassed hand moved over the shells heaped in the cold stone mortar. Whelks and money, cowries and leopard shells, and this whorled as an emir's turban, and this the scallop of St. James, an old pilgrim's hoard, dead treasure, hollow shells. A sovereign fell, bright and new, on the soft pile of the tablecloth. 3, Mr. Deasy said, turning his little savings box about in his hand. These are handy things to have. See, this is for sovereigns, this is for shillings, sixpences, half-crowns, and here crowns. See? He shot from it 2 crowns and 2 shillings. 3.12, he said. I think you'll find that's right.
Or that you're gone mute.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I said next, please.
Oh, okay. I didn't. Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you, sir, Stephen said, gathering the money together with shy haste and putting it all in the pocket of his trousers. No thanks at all, Mr. Deasy said. You have earned it. Stephen's hand, free again, went back to the yellow shells. Symbols, too, of beauty and power. A lump in my pocket. Symbols soiled by greed and misery. Don't carry it like that, Mr. Deasy said. You'll pull it out somewhere and lose it. You just buy one of these machines. You'll find them very handy. Answer something. Mine would be often empty, Stephen said. The same room and hour, the same wisdom, and I the same. 3 times now. 3 nooses round me here. Well, I can break them in this instant if I will. Because you don't save, Mr. Deasy said, pointing his finger. You don't know what money is. Money is power. When you have lived as long as I have, I know. If youth but knew. What does Shakespeare say? Put but money in thy purse. Iago, Stephen murmured. He lifted his gaze from the idle shells to the old man's stare. He knew what money was, Mr. Deasy said. He made money. A poet, yes, but an Englishman too. Do you know what is the pride of the English? Do you know what is the proudest word you'll ever hear from an Englishman's mouth? The sea's ruler, his sea-cold eyes looking on the empty bay. It seems history is to blame on me and on my words, on hating. That on his empire, Stephen said, the sun never sets. Ah, Mr. Deasy cried, that's not English. A French Celt said that. He tapped his saving box against his thumbnail. I'll tell you, he said solemnly, what is his proudest boast? I paid my way. Good man, good man. I paid my way. I never borrowed a shilling. and my life. Can you feel that? I own nothing. Can you? Next, please.
Mulligan, 9 pounds, 3 pairs of socks, 1 pair of brogues, ties. Curran, 10 guineas. McCann, 1 guinea. Fred Ryan, 2 shillings. Temple, 2 lunches. Russell, 1 guinea. Cousins, 10 shillings. Bob Reynolds, half a guinea. Curler, 3 guineas. Mrs. McKernan, 5 weeks' board. The lump I have is useless. For the moment, no, Stephen answered. Mr. Daisy laughed with rich delight, putting back his savings box. I knew you couldn't, he said joyously, but one day you must feel it. We are generous people, but we must also be just. I fear those big words, Stephen said, which make us so unhappy. Mr. Daisy stared sternly for some moments over the mantelpiece at the shapely bulk of a man in tartan philibegs, Albert Edward, Prince of Wales. You think me an old fogey and an old Tory, his thoughtful voice said. I saw 3 generations since O'Connell's time. I remember the famine. Do you know that the Orange Lodges agitated for repeal of the Union 20 years before O'Connell did, or before the prelates of your communion denounced him as a demagogue? You Fenians forget some things. Glorious, pious, and immortal memory. The Lodge of Diamond in Armagh, the splendid behung with corpses of papishes, horse, masked and armed, the Planters' Covenant, the Black North and True Blue Bible, Croppies lie down. Stephen sketched a brief gesture. I have rebel blood in me too, Mr. Daisy said, on the spindle side, but I'm descended from Sir John Blackwood, who voted for the Union. We are all Irish, all king's sons. Alas, Stephen said. Per vias rectus, Mr. Daisy said firmly, was his motto. He voted for it and put on his top boots to ride to Dublin from the Ards of Down to do so. Lal-da-ral-da-ra, the rocky road to Dublin. A gruff squire on horseback with shiny top boots. Soft day, Sir John. Soft day, Your Honor. Day, day. 2 top boots jogged dangling on to Dublin. Lal-da-ral-da-ral, lal-da-ral-da-ratty. Next.
That reminds me, Mr. Deasy said, you could do me a favor, Mr. Daedalus, with some of your literary friends. I have a letter here for the press. Sit down a moment. I have just to copy the end. He went to the desk near the window, pulled in his chair twice, and read off some words from the sheet on the drum of his typewriter. Sit down. Excuse me, he said over his shoulder. The dictates of common sense. Just a moment. He peered from under his shaggy brows at the manuscript by his elbow, and muttering, began to prod the stiff buttons of the keyboard slowly, sometimes blowing as he screwed up the drum to erase an error. Stephen seated himself noiselessly before the princely presence. Framed around the walls, images of vanished horses stood in homage, their meek heads poised in air. Lord Hastings' repulse, the Duke of Westminster's shot over, the Duke of Beaufort's Salon Prix de Paris 1866. Elfin riders sat them, watchful of a sign. He saw their speeds backing king's colours and shouted with the shouts of vanished crowds. Full stop, Mr. D.C. Baddy's keys, but prompt ventilation of this important question. Where Cranley led me to get rich quick, hunting his winners among the mud-splashed brakes amid the balls of bookies on their pitches and reek of the canteen over the motley slush. Even money, fair rebel, 10-1 the field. Dicers and thimble riggers, we hurried by after the hoofs, the vying caps and jackets, and past the meat-faced woman, a butcher's dame, nuzzling thirstily her clove of orange. Shouts rang shrill from the boys' playfield and a whirring whistle. Again, a goal. I am among them, among their battling bodies in a medley, the joust of life. You mean that knock-kneed mother's darling who seems to be slightly cross-sick? Jousts, time shock rebounds, shock by shock. Jousts, slush, and uproar of battles, the frozen death spew of the slain, a shout of spear spikes baited with men's bloodied guts. Now then, Mr. Deasy said, rising, came to the table, pinning together his sheets. Stephen stood up. I have put the matter into a nutshell, Mr. Deasy said. It's about the foot and mouth disease. Just look through it. There can be no two opinions on the matter. May I trespass on your valuable space? That doctrine of laissez-faire, which so often in our history, our cattle trade, the way of all our old industries, Liverpool ring which jockeyed the Galway harbour scheme, European conflagration, grain supplies through the narrow waters of the Channel, the Pluter-perfect imperturbability of the Department of Agriculture, pardoned a classical allusion, Cassandra, by a woman who was no better than she should be, to come to the point at issue. Next, please.
I don't mince words, do I, Mr. Deasy asked as Stephen read on. Foot and mouth disease, known as Cox preparation, serum and virus, percentage of salted horses, Rinderpest, emperor's horses at Murrensteg, Lower Austria. Veterinary surgeons, Mr. Henry Blackwood Price. Courteous offer a fair trial. Dictates of common sense. All important question. In every sense of the word, take the bull by the horns. Thanking you for the hospitality of your columns. I want that to be printed and read, Mr. Deasy said. You will see at the next outbreak they will put an embargo on Irish cattle, and it can be cured. It is cured. My cousin Blackwood Price writes to me it is regularly treated and cured in Austria by cattle doctors there. They offered to come over here. I am trying to work up influence with the department. Now I'm going to try publicity. I am surrounded by difficulties, by intrigues, by backstairs influences, by... He raised his forefinger and beat the air oddly before his voice spoke. Mark my words, Mr. Dedalus, he said. England is in the hand of the Jews, in all the highest places, her finance, her press, and they are the signs of a nation's decay. Whatever they gather, they eat up. Wherever they gather, they eat up the nation's vital strength. I have seen it coming these years. As sure as we are standing here, the Jew merchants are already at their work of destruction. Old England is dying. He stepped swiftly off, his eyes coming to blue life as they passed the broad sunbeam. He faced about and back again. Dying, he said, if not dead by now. The harlots cry from street to street. Shall weave old England's winding sheet. His eyes open wide in vision, stared sternly across the sunbeam in which he halted. A merchant, Stephen said, is one who buys cheap and sells dear. Jew or Gentile, is he not? Next, please.
They sinned against the light, Mr. Deasy said gravely, and you can see the darkness in their eyes, and that is why they are wanderers on the earth to this day. On the steps of the Paris Stock Exchange, the gold-skinned men quoting prices on their gemmed fingers, gabble of geese. They swarmed loud, uncouth about the temple, their heads thick plotting under maladroit silk hats. Not theirs. These clothes, this speech, these gestures. Their full, slow eyes belied the words, the gestures eager and unoffending, but knew the rancors massed about them and knew their zeal was vain. Vain patience to heap and hoard. Time surely would scatter all. A hoard heaped by the roadside, plundered and passing on. Their eyes knew their years of wandering and, patient, knew the dishonors of their flesh. Who has not? Stephen said. What do you mean? Mr. Deasy asked. He came forward a pace and stood by the table. His underjaw fell sideways, open uncertainly. Is this old wisdom? He waits to hear from me. History, Stephen said, is a nightmare from which I am trying to awake. From the playfield, the boys raised a shout, a whirring whistle. Go! What if that nightmare gave you a back kick? The ways of the Creator are not ours, Mr. Deasy said. All human history moves towards one great goal, the manifestation of God. Stephen jerked his thumb towards the window, saying, That is God. Hooray, aye, whir! What? Mr. Deasy asked. A shout in the street, Stephen answered, shrugging his shoulders. Mr. Deasy looked down and held for a while the wings of his nose tweaked between his fingers. Looking up again, he set them free. I am happier than you are, he said. You have committed many errors and many sins. A woman brought sin into the world. For a woman who was no better than she should be, Helen, the runaway wife of Menelaus. 10 years the Greeks made war on Troy. A faithless wife first brought the strangers to our shore here. Megmara's wife and her leman, Aurok, prince of Breffini. A woman too brought Ornello. Many errors, many failures, but not the one sin. I am a struggler now at the end of my days, but I will fight for the right till the end. For Ulster will fight, and Ulster will be right. Next.
Stephen raised the sheets in his hand. Well, sir, he began, I foresee, Mr. Deasy said, that you will not remain here very long at this work. You were not born to be a teacher, I think. Perhaps I'm wrong. A learner, rather, Stephen said. And here, what will you learn more? Mr. Deasy shook his head. Who knows, he said, to learn one must be humble, but life is a great teacher. Stephen wrestled the sheets again. As regards these, he began. Yes, Mr. Deasy said, you have 2 copies there. If you can have them published at once. Telegraph, Irish Homestead. I will try, Stephen said, and let you know tomorrow. I know 2 editors slightly. That will do, Mr. Deasy said briskly. I wrote last night to Mr. Field, MP. There is a meeting of the Cattle Traders Association today at the City Arms Hotel. I asked him to lay my letter before the meeting. You see if you can get it into your 2 papers. What are they? The Evening Telegraph. That will do, Mr. Deasy said. There's no time to lose. Now I have to answer the letter for my cousin. Good morning, sir, Stephen said, putting the sheets in his pocket. Thank you. Not at all, Mr. Deasy said as he searched the papers on his desk. I like to break a lance with you, old as I am. Good morning, sir, Stephen said, again bowing to his bent back. Next, please.
He went out by the open porch and down the grass path under the trees, hearing the cries of voices and playfield, and the lion's cushion on the pillars as he passed, toothless terrors. Still, I will help him in his fight. Mulligan will dub me a new name, the bullock befriending bard. Mr. Dedalus, running after me, no more letters. Just one moment. Yes, sir, Stephen said, turning back at the gate. Mr. Deasy halted, breathing hard and swallowing his breath. I just wanted to say, he said, Ireland, they say, has the honour of being the only country which never persecuted the Jews. Do you know that? No. And do you know why? He frowned sternly on the bright air. Why, sir? Stephen asked, beginning to smile. Because she never let them in, Mr. Deasy said solemnly. A cough ball of laughter leaped from his throat, dragging after it a rattling chain of phlegm. He turned back quickly, coughing, laughing, his lifted arms waving to the air. She never let them in, he cried again through his laughter, as he stamped on gittered feet over the gravel of the path. That's why, on his wise shoulders, through the checkerwork of leaves, the sun flung spangles, dancing coins. Next, please.
Chapter 3. Chapter 3. Ineluctable modality of the visible, at least that if no more. Thought through my eyes. Signatures of all things I'm here to read. Sea spawn and sea rack, the nearing tide, that rusty boot, snot green, blue silver, rust, colored signs, limits of the diaphane. But he adds, in bodies. Then he was aware of them bodies before them colored. How? By knocking his sconce against them, sure. Go easy. Bald he was and a millionaire. Maestro di color Pisano. Limit of the diaphane in. Why in? Diaphane, a diaphane. If you can put your 5 fingers through it, it is a gate. If not, a door. Shut your eyes and see. Stephen closed his eyes to hear his boots crush, crackling rack and shells. You are walking through it howsomever. I am, a stride at a time. A very short space of time through very short times of space. 5, 6, the Nakananda. Exactly. And that is the ineluctable modality of the audible. Open your eyes. No. Jesus. I fell over a cliff that beetles o'er his base, fell through the Nakananda ineluctably. I'm getting on nicely in the dark. My ash sword hangs at my side. Tap with it. They do. My 2 feet in his boots are at the ends of his legs. Nibinananda sounds solid, made by the mallets of Los Demiurges. Am I walking into eternity along Sandy Mount Strand? Crush, crack, creak, crick, crick, wild sea money. Domini Dizzy, Kenzama, won't you come to Sandy Mount? Madeline the Mare. Next, please.
Rhythm begins, you see. I hear a catalectic tetrameter of iams marching. No, a gallop. The line, the mare. Open your eyes now. I will. One moment. Has all vanished since? If I open and am forever in the black diaphane, basta, I will see if I can see. See now. There all the time without you, and ever shall be, world without end. They came down the steps from Leahy's terrace, prudently, Prauzimmer, and down the shelving shore, flabbily, their splayed feet sinking in the sifted sand, like me, like algae coming down to our mighty mother. Number 1 swung lordily her midwife's bag. The other's gap poked in the beach. From the Liberties, out for the day. Mrs. Florence McCabe, relict of the late Patrick McCabe, deeply lamented, of Bride Street. One of her sisterhood lugged me squealing into life. Creation from nothing. What has she in the bag? A Miss Birth with a trailing navel cord, hushed in ready wool. The cords of all link back, strand entwining cable of all flesh. That is why, mystic monks, will you be as gods? Gaze in your omphalos. Hello, Kinch here. Put me on to Edenville, Aleph Alpha Naught Naught 1. Spouse and helpmate of Adam Caedmon, Ava, naked Eve. She had no navel. Gaze, belly without blemish, bulging big, a buckler of taut vellum. No, a white-heaped corn, orient and immortal, standing from everlasting to everlasting, womb of sin. Wombed in sin darkness I was too, made, not begotten. By them, the man with my voice and my eyes, and a ghost woman with ashes on her breath. They clasped and sundered, and the couplers did the coupler's will. From before the ages, he willed me, and now may not will me away, or ever. Alexiternus stays about him. Is that then the divine substance wherein Father and Son are consubstantial? Where is poor dear Arius to try conclusions? Warring his life long on the transmagnificant Jubangtantiality, ill-starred heresiarch, in a Greek water closet he breathed his last, euthanasia, with beaded mitre and with crozier, stalled upon his throne, widower of a widowed sea, with upstiffed amophorion, with clotted hinder parts, heirs romped around him, nipping and eager airs. They are coming, waves, the white-maned seahorses, champing, bright wind bridled, the steeds of Manannan. Next.
I mustn't forget his letter for the press. And after? The ship, 12:30. By the way, go easy with that money like a good young imbecile. Yes, I must. His pace slackened. Here. Am I going to Aunt Sarah's or not? My consubstantial father's voice. Did you see anything of your artist brother Stephen lately? No? Sure, he's not down in Strasbourg Terrace with his Aunt Sally. But they fly a bit higher than that, eh? And tell us, Stephen, how is Uncle Si? Oh, weeping God, the things I married into. The boys up into Hayloft. The drunken little Costrawer and his brother, the cornet player. Highly respectable gondoliers. And skew-eyed Walter, sirring his father, no less. Sir, yes, sir, no, sir, Jesus wept, and no wonder by Christ. I pull the wheezy bell of their shuttered cottage and wait. They take me for a dun, peer out from a coign of vantage. It's Stephen, sir. Let him in. Let Stephen in. A bolt drawn back, and Walter welcomes me. We thought you were someone else. In his broad bed, Nuncle Richie, pillowed and blanketed, extends over the hillock of his knees a sturdy forearm. Clean-chested, he has washed the upper moiety. Morrow, nephew. He lays aside the lapboard whereon he drafts his bills of costs with the eyes of Master Goff and Master Shapland Tandy, filing consents and common searches and a writ of duces tecum, a bog oak frame over his bald head, Wiles resquiescat. The drone of his misleading whistle brings Walter back. Yes, sir. Malt for Richie and Stephen. Tell mother, where is she? Bathing, Chrissy, sir. Papa's little bed pal. Lump of love. No, Uncle Richie. Call me Richie. Damn your Lithia water, it lowers. Whatski? Uncle Richie, really? Sit down, or by the law, Harry, I'll knock you down. Walter squints vainly for a chair. He has nothing to sit down on, sir. He has nowhere to put it, you mug. Bring in your Chippendale chair. Would you like a bite of something? None of your damned law-de-daw air here. The rich of a rasher fried with a herring. Sure, so much the better. We have nothing in the house but backache pills. Al Urta. He drones bars of Ferrando's Aria de Sortita, the grandest number, Stephen, in the whole opera. Listen. His tuneful whistle sounds again, finally shaded with rushes of the air, his fists big drumming on his padded knees. This wind is sweeter. Houses of decay, mine, his a dog. You told the Clongo's gentry you had an uncle a judge and an uncle a general in the army. Come out of them, Stephen. Beauty is not there. nor in the stagnant bay of Marsh's library, where you read the fading prophecies of Joachim Abbas. For whom? The 100-headed rabble of the cathedral close. A hater of his kind ran from them to the wood of madness, his mane foaming, in the moon his eyeballs stars. Who in him, burst nostriled, the oval equine faces, Temple, Buck Mulligan, Foxy Campbell, Lantern Jaws, Abbas' father, Furious Dean, what offence laid fire to their brains? Half, Descende, Calve, what nimium de Calvaris, a garland of grey hair on his comminated head. See him, me, clambering down to the footbase, Descende, clutching a monstrous basilisk eyed. Get down, bawled Paul. Fire gives back menace and echo, assisting about the altar's horns, and the storted Latin of jack priests, moving burly in their owls, tonsured and oiled and gelded, fat with the fat of kidneys of wheat. Next, please.
And at the same instant, perhaps a priest round the corner is elevating it. Dring, dring. And 2 streets up, another locking it into a pix. Dring, dring. And in Lady Chapel, another taking housel all to his own cheek. Dring, dring. Down, up, forward, back. Dan Occam thought of that, invincible doctor. A misty English morning, the imp hypothesis tickled his brain. Bringing his host down and kneeling, he heard twine with his second bell, the first bell in the transept. He is lifting his, and rising, heard, now I am lifting. There are 2 bells, he is kneeling, twang and diphthong. Cousin Stephen, you will never be a saint, Isle of Saints. You were awfully holy, weren't you? You prayed to the Blessed Virgin that you might not have a red nose. You prayed to the devil in Serpentine Avenue that the Phoebe window in front might lift or close, that the Phoebe widow in front might lift or close still more from the wet street. Oh, see, Sherto, sell your soul for that, you. Dyed rags pinned round a squaw. More, tell me, more still. On the top of Haut Tram alone, crying to the rain, naked women. What about that, eh? Next, please.
What about what? What else were they invented for? Reading 2 pages apiece of 7 books every night, eh? I was young. You bowed to yourself in the mirror, stepping forward to applause earnestly, striking face. Hurry for the goddamn idiot Ray. No one saw. Tell no one. Books you were going to write with letters for titles. Have you read his F? Oh, yes, but I prefer Q. Yes, but W is wonderful. Oh, yes, W. Remember your epiphanies written on green oval leaves, deeply deep, copies to be sent if you died to all the great libraries of the world, including Alexandria. Someone was to read them there after a few thousand years. Mantara, Pico della Mirandola like. I, very like a whale. When one reads these strange pages of one long gone, one feels that one is at one with one who once. The grainy sand had gone from under his feet. His boots trod again a damp, crackling mast, razor shells, squeaking pebbles, that on the unnumbered pebbles beats, wood sieved by the shipworm, lost armada. Unwholesome sand flats waited to suck his treading soles, breathing upward sewage breath. A pocket of seaweed smoldered in sea fire under a midden of man's ashes. He coasted them, walking warily. A porter bottle stood up, starched to its waist in the cakey sand dough. A sentinel, isle of dreadful thirst, broken hoops on the shore. At the land, a maze of dark, cunning nets. Further away, chalk scrolled back doors, and on the higher beach, a drying line with 2 crucified shirts. Rings End, wigwams of brown steersmen and master mariners. Human shells next Next.
He halted. I have passed the wait on Sarah's. Am I not going there? Seems not. No one about. He turned northeast and crossed the firmer sand towards the pigeon house. Qui vous a mis dans cette fichue position? C'est le pigeon Joseph. Patrice, home on furlough, lapped warm milk with me in the bar McMahon, son of the wild goose Kevin Egan of Paris. My father's a bird, he lapped the sweet lace showed with pink young tongue bunny's face. Lappin'. He hopes to win in the gross lot. About the nature of women he read in Michelet, but he must send me La Vie de Jesus by Monsieur Leo Taxel, lend it to his friend. C'est tourdant, vous savez, moi je suis socialiste. Je ne crois pas en existence de Dieu, faut pas le dire à mon père. Il croit? Mon père, oui. Slush, he laps. My Latin quarter hat. God, we simply must dress the character. I want puce gloves. You were a student, weren't you? Of what in the other devil's name? PCN, physiques, chimiques, et naturel. Aha, eating your gross worth of civet, flesh pots of Egypt, elbowed by belching cabmen. Just say in the most natural tone, when I was in Paris, Boulmiche, I used to. Yes, used to carry punch tickets to prove an alibi if they arrested you for the murder somewhere. Justice. On the night of the 17th of February, 1904, the prisoner was seen by two witnesses. Other fellow did it, other me. Hat, tie, overcoat, nose. Louis, c'est moi. You seem to have enjoyed yourself. Proudly walking. Whom were you trying to walk like? Forget, a dispossessed. With mother's money order, 8 shillings, the banging door of the post office slammed in your face by the usher. Hunger toothache. Encore 2 minutes, look clock. Must get fermé. Hired dog. Shoot him to bloody bits with a bang shotgun. Bits man spattered. Walls all brass buttons. Bits all crack in place, clack back. Not hurt? Oh, that's all right. Shake hands. See what I meant? See? Oh, that's all right. Shake. Oh, that's all. That's all. Only all right. Next, please.
You were going to do wonders. What? Missionary to Europe after fiery Columbanus, Firco and Scotus on their creepy stools in heaven, spilt from their pint pots, loud Latin laughing, Hugh, pretending to speak broken English as you dragged your valise, porter 3p across the slimy pier at Newhaven. Come on. Rich booty you brought back, the tutu, 5 tattered numbers of pantalon blanc, a culotte rouge, a blue French telegram, curiosity to show. Mother dying, come home, father. The aunt thinks you killed your mother. That's why she won't. Then here's a health to Mulligan's aunt, and I'll tell you the reason why. She always kept things decent in the Hannigan family. His feet marched in sudden proud rhythm over the sand furrows along by the boulders of the south wall. He stared at them proudly. Piled stone mammoth skulls, gold light on sea, on sand, on boulders. The sun is there, the slender trees, the lemon houses. Next, please.
Paris, Rowley, waking, crude sunlight on her Lebanon streets, moist pith of fans of bread, the frog-green wormwood, her matin incense, court the air. Bellomo rises from the bed of his wife's lover's wife. The kerchiefed housewife is astir, a saucer of acetic acid in her hand. In Rodot's Yvonne and Madeleine, new make their tumbled beauties, shattering with gold teeth chaussons of pastry, their mouths yellowed with a poudre of flan breton. Faces of Paris men go by, their well-pleased pleasers, curled conquistadors. Next, please.
Okay, I think we will stop here.
Okay.
Make the note. What is next week? Okay, so it must be the May 25th. Be next Thursday, I think.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Comments, questions, observations, whatever.
I think maybe I can kick it off.
Okay.
There's a very important sentence at page 40 in my edition. It's the last, the previous episode, where
And Nestor.
history, Stephen said, is a nightmare from which I am trying to awake.
Mhm.
And I think it's very clear Joyce is saying this. And what we've been reading so far is, I suppose, the certainty that Mr. DC is bringing to everything he said. Joyce stroke Stephen is trying to embrace uncertainty. And a lot of this episode is going on in his head. So we're getting very much his inner thoughts. And I think maybe this is why Joyce left Ireland. You know, he wanted to be able to step back and look at Ireland from a distance. Most of his contemporary writers and not so contemporary all went to England. He went to the continent, which is odd. But it's the history of Ireland is the important thing here. And I think he's struggling with that. He feels constrained by it, and he's trying to break free of it. And of course, what we get is Ulysses.
And also, I think to back up what you're just saying there, when he describes how he was reading in the library Aristotle and how he could there, where he could read there night by night, I think like what he's comparing there is like the suffocating part of the Tower, Ireland, Dublin, everything. That, you know, when he was there for the time he was there, it was more advanced that you were allowed to live, because he also at another time brings up about the Jews and how they were all merchants and things in Paris, and how they were allowed to breed as against having people like Mr. DC.
Mm-hmm. Well, DC is just a man of cliched history, which unfortunately is most people's history is just cliches strung together. You know, and you know, everything DC says is some sort of stereotype or cliche.
And often wrong.
Always wrong.
Yeah.
It's interesting that at this time we're living in the decade of commemorations. And speaking of history, when I was a school-going lad, our history teachers would not take us any further than 1916. So we had no experience of the Civil War or whatever happened after that. And really, it's not until the last 18 months that I've been able to sort of discover what went on in those times. So I sort of empathize very much with what Joyce is saying, that, you know, our history was very formulaic. We were taught to hate England. Some of that comes across in Ulysses, but certainly not the way we were taught it in school. So it throws it all up in the air for me, and that's one of the reasons I love this book too much.
I might be, I don't mean to be presumptuous and I might be wrong, but I would think, Donna, that you're old enough that when you were being taught history, the Civil War would still have been a very real thing to a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And so it's possible that your history teachers didn't want to bring up anything after 1916 for that reason.
Mhm.
I don't know, but I mean, it's just an
No,
observation.
I would agree, Bill. I mean, it affected our politics. And, to quote the phrase, set brother against brother.
Yeah.
And it's really only now, if even now, that we're beginning to shake that off 100 years later.
And depending upon what side of the conflict you were on politically, it would determine what you thought was the real history of those events. There wouldn't be a real consensus of about what happened. It would all depend upon which side you were on as to what happened. Was Michael Collins, ambushed and murdered, or was he a political target? Or there's so many different ways to look at the same event depending upon your politics and your motivation.
Yeah, well, that's certainly true right here in the United States. I mean, we are long after our Civil War, and it's still a very contentious subject. And I can assure you that the history that's probably taught in Michigan and Ohio is going to be significantly different than the history taught in Alabama and Mississippi. And as a history teacher, I mean, you can see this right now with DeSantis and Rick Perry and all the stuff about critical race theory. I mean, basically what they're saying is don't teach that history.
Right.
So certainly right after any kind of civil war and strife, it's one thing, to be criticizing the Germans for starting World War I and World War II and bringing out all the stereotypes there. But it's another thing to, be talking about a family fight.
Well, there's the official history of the United States, which is maybe handed down by the government of the United States. And then there's a more nuanced history that requires research and reading and thinking about things. I think many Americans were fed the line that, well, still, I mean, I've had arguments with people about this many times, that the atomic bombing was necessary to end the war. Well, no, I don't think it was necessary to end the war. And I will argue that with anybody, anytime. No, it was purely, and it was, it's a war crime that the United States will always be guilty of, in my mind. But the official history is, well, it saved lives, it ended the war. Which is the real history.
Well, I think that this history example is actually just a very clear example of what Joyce is doing in the book the entire time, which is trying to remove the easy explanations. And so we can start seeing the complexity. And
I want to know what did James Joyce do on the 17th of February in 1904 in the evening that he needed an alibi for? What is he remembering there? That I don't know if we'll ever, maybe if we read, and I haven't read his letters in many, many years, but maybe I'll go back and read his letters and see if he mentions anything about the 17th of February in Paris.
Okay, did he bring up that date? I mean,
Yeah, it's right
Yes,
on.
he says it. He says it specifically
Mm.
about having an alibi. He needed an alibi for that.
It's on in the Wordsworth, it's on the bottom of 38.
Well,
It's
this is the ticket. This is the ticket thing. He kept
Yeah,
he
right.
kept the ticket in his pocket.
Yeah,
And is he
Right.
talking about himself? Is he talking about Kevin Egan? I mean,
But it's specifically the 17th of February 1904. The prisoner was seen by 2 witnesses. And then Stephen thinks other fellow did it, other me. So he's referring to himself, or he could be in the mind of some other character thinking it. So yeah, it may not be him, may not be Stephen / Joyce. It could be someone else he's thinking of. Anyway,
yeah.
But when they say you seem to have enjoyed yourself, he could have had an affair with a woman, for example, a married woman.
right.
It could be something that's also, there's his self feels like it feels like a crime to him.
Orla, I want you to do me let's try this, Orla. You were so smart, and what you had to say is really good. And so would you turn off your video for a little bit? I want to see if it improves the sound.
Sure.
Because the audio in this case is actually more important than okay, say something, Orla.
But could you not hear what I was saying at all?
No, we could hear you, but it was fading in and out a great deal. It was
That's
very
much better.
but that is
That's
better.
much better, Orla, yeah.
Oh, it's obviously been hacked down here.
Well, actually, last week it was a little wavy also. So I don't know, but I'm glad to hear your voice strong and clear because, like I say, you say really smart things and you have great observations. So, and
That's
Oops.
very flattering of you. Flattery will get you everywhere. No, I want to know, is he the first person to have said history is a nightmare from which I'm trying to awake, or is that a famous quote?
aha. Does anybody know? Mr. Kennedy, do you know?
Because when it's so familiar, that line, and I just want to know, is it Joyce who said that first and everybody agrees with him, or people quote it all the time, or is it someone else?
Oh, let's
Oh,
ask this to Google.
I think it was Joyce's own phrase. I don't recall it being attributed to anyone else.
Mhm.
But it's just the burden of the past on the present.
Well, Google doesn't give any other sources for it.
What
Is
what I
one
think is interesting, it's
or I can't tell whether you finished what you were saying.
no, I was going to say something, and then Lois said she couldn't find something on Google, and then Katrina was about to say she found something,
Katrina, your
but
microphone.
I can't hear
is
Katrina. Katrina's on mute.
in the annotated Ulysses, history trying to awake after Jules Laforgue, Mélange posthume. It's a French translation. Life is very dreary, very sordid. History is an old and variegated nightmare that does not suspect that the best jokes are also the most brief. Maybe that's where he got it.
That
I don't
doesn't
know.
Maybe.
sound like he's quoting that.
I don't always trust
just
the
one other thing.
annotations very much.
Yeah, I know. It's
Well,
there.
this is okay. So this is an exact example of the problem that I think Joyce is pointing to, which is almost anything that is said, unless you have, direct personal experience and your mind is open, it's going to be distorted in some manner. Whether it's the, Cambridge Guide to Ulysses, or whether it's a history book, or whatever, there's always too many people have too many dogs in the fight. And we're all raised on cliches. I mean, even in the best of schools, we basically, our education is cliched. And then we had this very interesting problem because movies are so important in modern lives. Most people's ideas of history have nothing to do with books at all. It's some movie that they saw that they've got scrambled in their mind with, whatever history they studied in school, and that gets all distorted. So,
Yeah.
In the context of the book, though, and what we've read already, Stephen has been teaching history. He's been teaching Latin or Roman history to his charges, but he also had that conversation with Haynes.
Yeah.
When Haynes says, well, I fear history is to blame. And so Stephen's remembering a lot of things when he and Mr. Daisy as well. He's remembering many different events to come up with that phrase that history is a nightmare. From which I'm trying to awake. So, and it's true, Stephen / Joyce is dealing with the history of Ireland. And as a modern, contemporary European thinker, writer, he's trying to escape that nightmare of Irish history, 800 years of British rule and religious domination by the Catholic Church, over all of the society pretty much, and over all of its morals. And so it's not just a throwaway line, I don't think, to Joyce or Stephen. It's a real
it's a real line. There's no doubt about that. Plus I think it's important to add that he was in Trieste, and Trieste itself has got a very messy history and a very messy politics.
Sure.
You got the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and then you got the Italians, and then you got all these, varieties of political ideologies in the city. So, yeah, I mean, Irish history seems to be a particularly good example, but is certainly not the only example. In fact, I would personally contend that almost any histories qualify for being a mess.
But it is a driving force in his writing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I just want to comment on "We're all Irish, all king's sons." It's on page 29. Now, if you can, anybody, it's on page 29 of Wordsworth, but it comes directly after something from a more Anglo point of view. But I think what he's saying there is all Irish people believe they are descended from kings or chieftains.
Correct. Yeah.
And so it can be read in a different way. And then he says, alas, because everybody Irish thinks they're descended from chieftains or kings because that's the way people think here. So you can stand up with any man. It gives a sense of, like you're all equal because you're all kings.
Well, there's also the very real, I would say, or possibly real experience or of the droit de seigneur, that the Irish kings or the chieftains could have relations with any woman that they wanted. It wasn't as if marriage was such. I mean, you look about the story of the Tawn, and all of the Maeve is sleeping with everyone, and the king is sleeping with everyone. So maybe all Irishmen are descended from kings. It's like Genghis Khan. The DNA studies have said almost a gazillion people are descended from Genghis Khan, and it's because every time there was a conquest, he would take all the women and he would just serially rape them. That was the way rulers ruled.
Solomon and his 10,000 wives.
That's exactly it. Yeah. I was struck by that phrase. You seem to have enjoyed yourself. It took me directly to Bloom on the beach with Gertie, and because having had an ejaculation in his trousers, and he's sticky and he's wet and he's uncomfortable, and I can just hear Joyce in that experience saying, "Well, you seem to have enjoyed yourself." And maybe that's what happened in Paris on the night of the 17th of February.
Well, I will tell you that it was the premiere of Madame Butterfly. That date. That's all I could find when I checked out the date with Mr. Google.
That's interesting. I wonder. I think if Joyce had been at that premiere, there would be a record of that in his letters or his.
It was premiered in Milan.
Oh no,
it wasn't in Paris. Sorry, never mind. Never mind.
Okay.
I just double checked where it premiered.
Just going back, Bill, to what you said there about being hot and sticky and uncomfortable. One of the movies, the endless movies about Joyce, starring Ewan McGregor, has him walking out with Nora. And she, let's say, interferes with him and makes him hot and sticky. So, he would have been familiar with that.
That I think that's the, I don't know if it's apocryphal or if he actually claims it to have been true, but that is the story, that on their first actual date, she did make a man of him in a way, or interfere with him, depending on your point of view.
She interfered, but he gave her permission.
Yes. Yeah.
I have an Irish question. There's a reference in here to somebody being from the Liberties. Is there an area called the Liberties, and where is that?
In Dublin.
Yeah.
It's a neighborhood in Dublin.
It's central Dublin.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was a tough area. It was an area where if I've got it correct, even policemen did not like to wander into the Liberties. And there was at least one Irish rebellion that came out of the Liberties, and probably more. So it was a good place to run and hide if you were being pursued, and it was kind of down and dirty. I wanted to mention that there's the whole thing, of course, the English government's effect on Ireland, but I always want to point out that actually the English government and the English upper classes' effect upon people in England was equally as terrible. That the amount of put upon and exploited people of all sexes and ages in London was just a disaster. So it's a kind of a habit of the English ruling class to exploit. And then, and now I'm going to step way out of line and say that that's one reason why I think that the English government encouraged racism, to help those or put upon people in England to feel that they were better than somebody.
It's the concept of empire, isn't it? Sorry, Lewis, please go ahead.
There's also a quote from Lyndon Johnson. Something goes, as long as you can convince the poorest white man that he's better than the best black man. He won't notice you're picking his pocket.
Hmm.
So anyway, I just wanted to point that out.
I think it has to do with the concept of empire that, I think is particularly significant now with the coronation of Charles III, that, empire is not what it used to be back in the day. And certainly native peoples were trodden down. We obviously here in Ireland feel it with our 700 to 800 years of being downtrodden. But it happened in India, it happened in Africa. And I think you're right, Duncan. I take your point fully that, it's sort of the upper class looking down on the lower class and keeping them in their place.
Yeah.
I like to imagine a more maybe stage Irish pronunciation, and I call him Charles the Turd.
Yeah.
Just for reference, the Liberties is that, I don't know if it matters much, but it's on the south side of the Liffey. It's down by Temple Bar, St. Patrick's Cathedral, and the Guinness warehouses. That's where the Liberties.
And it draws further south into
Further
the area
south.
called the Coombe.
The Coombe.
Yeah. But it's interesting because housing policy in Ireland has reduced the size of the Liberties. And in the 60s and 70s, when they were developing the outer limits of the city, places like Clondalkin and Blanchardstown, they moved an awful lot of inner city people out, so that sort of the concept of family and extended family that would have existed in the Liberties was broken down and led to a lot of difficulties subsequently.
Yep. We actually had the same phenomena here in the United States. It was called urban renewal.
Yeah,
that was how they framed it, but it actually it took a lot of traditional minority neighborhoods and just shattered them.
correct.
That's how we got Lincoln Center in New York City.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So, and it's this sort of thing that makes me, yes, Joyce is definitely Dublin centered, but in my mind, it's what makes Joyce kind of a universal writer.
Yes.
It's of what he's talking about, using examples from Dublin, and of course the Dublin flavor is important, but the examples are found
Worldwide.
in all times and spaces, and I think that's what he's trying to get across.
Got the 17th of February, the nadir of American race rooms.
I'm sorry, Orla, I didn't understand.
I think my machine, I have really bad reception. I can barely hear any of you anymore. But I've got the 17th of February was the nadir of American race relations, the state convention of the so-called lily white Republicans.
Wow.
Asserting white supremacy, who endorsed Theodore Roosevelt in the presidential election in 1904.
Hmm.
And I just think it's interesting because it has nothing to do with what was happening in Paris, but there's an awful lot about, I suppose, race going on in that episode we were reading.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And in Ireland, the Kildare football team are called the Lily Whites. Just nothing to do with it at all. They're called the Lily Whites. And I just hadn't noticed supremacy.
Yeah.
Well, in London, Tottenham Hotspur are also called the Lily Whites. And they very much have a Jewish background.
Alrighty. I think probably this is, we're getting close to a good time to wrap it up for today. Do I need to make any notes about page numbers?
In the Gabla, it's page 36 up at the top.
Okay. And
In the Long Penguin, it's page 53.
53. Okay. Anybody got it? Done?
My
Wordsworth,
penguin is 48.
48. Okay.
Wordsworth is 38.
All right.
Or 39, actually.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I personally found this to be quite interesting and fun. I don't really think of Nestor as being a major chapter, but I thought it reading Nestor and then sliding into Proteus worked really well and brought out a lot of stuff. So we will continue with Proteus next Thursday.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Bye, everybody.
So long.
Bye.
Thank you, Duncan. Thank